right. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us this afternoon for our Ghost Forest Teacher Workshop. We're really excited to have you meet with the film's producer and one of the scientists from the film. And then we're going to show you some educational materials that you can use to hopefully use this film with your students. My name is Nikki Bradenberg, and I'm the Director of Education at MontanaPBS. I come from a teaching background, and now I get to help teachers teach using digital tools. I'm joined today by our team from MontanaPBS. We have Deanna Midland. Wave, Deanna. She's our early learning specialist, and you'll get to hear from her for a little bit. We have Laura Dick, who's our digital content and marketing manager. Hi, Laura. And then we have Brianna McCabe, who's the film's producer, and you'll hear more from her later. And that's our team from MontanaPBS. We're also really lucky today to have Ilana Abramson from the United States Forest Service, who's going to talk about some of the curriculum materials that her organization has, and that'll be a little later in the program. And I'm going to kick it off to Brianna right now to introduce our special guest and begin our discussion about the film. And then I'll share my screen again and show you a real short clip from the film. Take it away, Deanna, or Brianna.
All right, there's so many Annas here today, we were joking. So I don't know if, since we do have a smaller group, I don't know how many of you have had a chance to view the film yet. I don't know if you can react with a little thumbs up if you've seen it. There's more choices too, but that's okay if you haven't. I won't take it personally. We are going to show a little clip. Nikki, did you want to do that before we get into the interview?
Yeah, definitely. Okay. I will do that right now. So this film is Brianna's senior thesis project, right? Let's see if I can bring it up. This is just a clip, the introduction of the film.
When you go into high elevations, it's cold, it's typically fairly dry, and things don't rot. And so when whitebark pine gets killed in the high elevations there, those trees stay standing for decades, sometimes 100 years. And we call those a ghost forest.
High up in the mountains, there's a pine tree that can live more than 1,000 years. And when the sun hits it just right, its light gray bark shines almost white.
Whitebark pine is a super cool tree. Like, it is my favorite tree species by far.
It's beautiful. It develops these incredible gnarly forms.
Its needles cluster in bunches of 5. Its cones grow on the very top as a beacon for the bird it relies on to plant its seeds. And even though it's one of the most remote trees in North America, its history is intertwined with humans.
We've used trails going over high elevation for traveling, for hunting purposes, for culture purposes. And part of those high elevation forests is whitebark pine.
But now this ancient pine is in peril. Mountaintops are warming, allowing pine beetle to bore in. A deadly disease called blister rust is escalating, and wildfire suppression has stifled whitebark's opportunities to regenerate.
So in many places, whitebark pine is almost gone.
Projections show we stand to lose all but 2% of whitebark pine in the coming decades.
If we don't do something now, given how long it takes to make a difference with it, in our grandchildren's time there won't be whitebark pine anymore.
And the loss of this single species would snowball, not just through the mountains, but to the rivers and valleys below.
It would be almost inconceivable the value that we would lose from the high mountain landscapes.
It could have significant impacts on agriculture, on our fisheries, recreation, a lot of economic impacts you would never expect from a tree that's up on top of a mountain.
But as whitebark edges toward extinction, a few passionate people are rising to the challenge to save it.
To be doing nothing would be giving up without trying.
And that momentum is driving new discoveries.
It may just be one species of tree, but it just is one of the first. I'm really hoping that that's not the legacy we leave. is ghost forest after ghost forest after ghost forest.
Thanks everyone for putting up with, it's never the best quality to watch through Zoom, but that's a little taste of what Ghost Forests is all about. I'm Brianna McCabe. For those of you who just joining us, I produced this film as my master's thesis project, and it evolved a little bit since then. But it really started when I learned about the research from one person, and we're so lucky to have that person with us today, Diana Six. Say hello. So Diana is a scientist here at the University of Montana. And I just want to chat and introduce her to all of you. First of all, the film, by the way, is available online. It's 26 minutes, so you can feel free to tune in on your own for full quality. But we just wanted to get a chance to chat with you about all that we have aside of that. So Diana, tell us about your evolution to Montana. Really, I could have done a documentary on Diana herself because she's such a fascinating story. So it's not a quick bio kind of a question, Diana, but what led you to Montana and how'd you get to the University of Montana?
I didn't have exactly, as you said, the typical route to becoming a professor. As a little kid, I was really into science, but in those days, girls weren't encouraged to go into science. In fact, our science club at my junior high school wasn't even open to girls. And I didn't have a good home life, and so I kind of ended up in drugs and dropped out of school and just kind of floundered for a long time. I was even homeless for a while, but I found my way back. I went to night school, got my diploma, and then I had these crazy teachers there that told me I should go to college. And I did. I enrolled just to make them happy. I had no idea what I was getting into. Took a biology class and oh, that was it. It was like I hit my passion, was no turning back. And then eventually, applied and I became a professor here. But along the way, I fell in love with bark beetles and forests and yeah, just that's where I've been.
And how has the subject that you study evolved over that time?
Oh, lots of ways. As you mature as a scientist, you learn more. And so you can take your questions into places maybe nobody's gone before. But also, I never thought I'd be working on climate change. When I started 25 years ago, it was sort of like, we knew it was happening, but it was way off in the future, right? Except it wasn't. Everything started changing on me. And pretty soon I really had no choice. You can't work in forests, you can't work on probably any ecosystem on the planet now without having to work on climate change because it's changing everything. So your research has to evolve with it.
And you mentioned that it was really teachers that gave you that initial push toward education. What was it that made you want to become a teacher yourself?
That was accidental. So I was in love with science and biology, and in grad school, they teach you to do research. And then you get a job as a professor, and oh my God, now I have to teach. And I was terrified. I was shy. I didn't know what to do. So I just thought back to, okay, what was good about the teachers that excited me? Because we all had teachers that we hated to go to class, right? And then we had teachers where we couldn't wait to go to class. So I thought back to those teachers that, that I just loved their courses and tried to emulate what they did, which was to teach clearly, give the students a nice path, organized, but especially to express the passion I have for my topic, because it's that excitement, I think, that excites the students. And so that's basically what I did, and it seems to have worked.
You know, you do so much. You're teaching the work, you're researching and making these discoveries. And then there's this whole other part of your job that I don't think a lot of people know about, but that's getting out the word to the public and being able to share this information that you discovered with the public. How do you find different avenues for that and the time?
I think science communication is one of the most important things scientists can do. So even if you don't have much time, you have to make that time, because it is crucial. You know, we can do all the science we want and get all this incredible information, but if it never gets to anybody, it can't be used. And we can't really use it to address all these important issues we have. So it's really our responsibility to get out and do it. And not just do it, try and do it well. Because if you do a bad job, you're going to do the opposite. People won't get engaged. But there's so much that we can do to get out to the public. And we have the opportunity now to do it more easily. Social media is fantastic. Most of the scientists I know are on Twitter. That's how we communicate. It allows us to reach all sorts of people in various ways. We can make podcasts. I can make videos on my phone. They're actually pretty decent, not like yours, but but we have tools and opportunities now that we didn't have in the past. And I think with all the issues we have with the environment, it should be a really top priority. And so I've just made it one of mine.
Well, you're just a gold star communicator, and that's why it made you such an excellent choice for an expert in this film, because you're able to get out the word and say things, you know, that people can relate to in an understandable way. I think that's really important. And I think that that's why hopefully this film resonates with younger audiences too, and that they can all get a little something out of it. So I'd love to bring in Deanna Midland, our early learning specialist now, to ask a few questions about how Diana can see these lessons going to all of your classrooms.
Thank you, Brianna, and thank you, everyone. But what a pleasure and honor to meet you, Dr. Six. I have a passion in my heart for science and admire the work that you do, and what a great classroom you have when you get to go out in the forest. That's fantastic, right? Best ever.
You can't beat that.
You can't. I agree with you. And that just loops me into the movie and thinking about children and how you so eloquently talked about the piece of bark was like a book and how it told a story. That would resonate with children very young to even older classes. How could you see teachers using that idea to motivate kids to look at bark, for instance, or rocks or what have you, to tell stories?
Well, I think, you know, when you walk around in any ecosystem, whether it's a forest or prairie or whatever, in a way, it is like walking through a library. There are just books of stories surrounding you. And with a little bit of information, you can begin to open those books and begin to read them and understand them. It's sort of like if we never learned to read and we walk through a library, we couldn't access any of that information. But if you get the basics of ecology or biology, you can begin to open those books yourself as you're out in the forest. And literally anything you pick up out there has a story unfolding in front of you. And I think if you kind of put that in that context to students, whatever their age, that when they begin to look at things, whether they're turning over rocks, peeling bark off, that there's a story going on, then they begin to look at it that way. And quite often, if you don't tell them the whole story, they'll be able to build it themselves. And I think through their own observation begin to learn how to read on their own. Does that make sense?
Oh, I think beautiful, beautiful sense. I absolutely, because they're so keen to
Yeah.
see what they see. I think we miss it with the busyness of being an adult, and
Yeah.
and
Especially younger children haven't had that observational ability taught out of them yet. They're already really good at looking at stuff and finding things and seeing it. And so with just a little nudge, quite often, they're very good at finding things that we don't even see.
oh, absolutely. I think anytime you lose a contact, have a little kid come with you. They'll find that. So,
Mm.
that just leads me into the next thought I have after listening to you today, and then in the video. I think with older children, they're prepped and they're even more ready because for current events, and they're quite wise to that. And would you think there's a way for teachers to support learning more about the critical zone and how the ghost forest, how that's right there, and they could do something about that right now through any means that you see it? Let's say a junior high or high school student.
Yeah, you know, whitebark pine is, I think, a really good example to help people learn some of the things that are happening in our ecosystems. It's really one of the shining examples, although there's unfortunately way too many of these happening around the world. Um, but there is now quite a network of people that work on this system. There's a lot of information out there. And so I think for this particular system, if students are interested in learning more, there's a lot out there for them. But there's also a lot of people they can contact. Um, myself, people working on whitebark pine, I think it's intimidating for students to reach out, but most of us are very happy to get emails and phone calls and start talking with people. And so I think, teachers can encourage um, their students to contact researchers, people working on this problem. Um, we could even put together a network of people that kind of like Skype a scientist, where, students can meet with them either individually or as a class. These things can be very fun and very powerful, and they're not intimidating for students once you get the kind of Skype or Zoom thing going.
Yes. I think another piece, I just love that you also pursued your passion as a young girl in science, that was a distant bell ringing in your mind. And how, though we know kids of all ages come from different economic backgrounds, different cultural backgrounds. In the film, there's a piece about the Native American culture. And I was wondering if you had some ideas how children in in the Native American groups could go take some of their heritage and bring it forth to support knowledge in the white bark pine.
Yeah, I think that's an important concept, is to share across cultures, um, kind of ways of understanding. Um, there's incredible cultural knowledge on whitebark pine, and it's only recently that kind of, the standard um, kind of dominant society scientists are beginning to listen to some of this to get an understanding, a deeper understanding of what's happening with whitebark, how it was used, where it used to live. Um, and so I think incorporating listening sessions from different perspectives, including from having Native American students tell, you know, people maybe in more white Missoula uh, their experiences. But one of the things that people with the Salish and Kootenai tribes, at least, are finding is that, of course, there's been a disconnect for the young people with their own cultural understanding of the environment. And so that's one of the really nice things, is that the tribes are now reconnecting their own youth with whitebark pine and its value and some of the threats, so that they're becoming involved in the kind of restoration and maintenance of their own cultural resources. And so there's a lot to be learned within cultural groups, but across groups.
Thank you. My next question, I think you've answered, was just a call to action, but I think you've hit it on so many different levels that we can all find a different way to have students and families find their way of a call to action and passion. And again, it was an honor to get to ask you these questions, and I turn it over to Nikki.
If anybody in the group would like to ask Diana or Brianna questions about the film, please, you can unmute and ask directly. Or if you'd like to put them in the chat box, we can answer them that way. We had a few questions come in on our attendance form, so I'll start with those. And as people are getting warmed up, you feel more comfortable to hop in. One question was, what are the key takeaways you want our students to know about ghost forests?
I think for me, the key takeaway is that we are, and it's not just for whitebark pine, but we are at the point with climate change and other things that are happening in our forests, like invasive diseases and insects, that we are getting to the point where many of our ecosystems and really important species are becoming at risk of disappearing. And so we are at a point in time where it's super important to begin to take action. It's not 50 years off, it's not 100 years off, it's now. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's the big takeaway, is that this is sort of a poster child, if you will, but it is not isolated. And so if we value our world, this is the time to begin to take care of it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. One question is, how many acres of ghost forests are there?
Millions. That's scary, right? Mm-hmm. I don't know. No one knows. It's funny that we don't even know the full distribution of whitebark pine, because it was never economic, right? It was never a timber species. But we know that even in just Yellowstone National Park, there's already more than 1 million acres of whitebark pine that's dead. And that's just in Yellowstone. Oh. So it's big. It's extensive, and it's a combination of things, but it's climate change, invasive species, and then of course the beetle, which is climate driven. So
mm-hmm. And those are all the questions that came in on the form. Is anyone else in the group like to ask a question?
I have a question.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
Do you see a way to instill some optimism and hope for students as they embark in these really heavy questions that they should act on now? My daughter pointed out the other day, like, we watched another depressing film about, and that's heavy,
Yeah. It's very heavy. There's an incredible uptick in ecologists seeking out counseling because of some pretty severe depression that comes along with the job. You get into ecology because you love ecosystems, and then you end up feeling like you're a coroner that's just coming in and, chronicling death. It's hard, and it can make you want to give up. But the nice thing is that as we go out and we conduct research, we find in most of these ecosystems glimmers of hope. Okay, for one, I mean, we look at climate models and those are like, they're just scary. They're predicting 92% loss of whitebark pine just due to climate change. But those models are based on the trees being all genetic clones, and they're not. They don't all respond the same. And so with some of the work we're doing, looking at genetics and so forth, it shows that these trees do have some ability to adapt to warmer climate. They do have some resistance to the beetles. They'll probably do better than we've been predicting. So that feels good. But the fact that it's genetic means it can be passed on to the young, to the new trees. And so some of these forests may be able to persist and regenerate. But if we don't go out and do the science and look, we won't know if that potential's out there. And if we find it, that might be something we can use to help restore the tree. So there are things that can be done right now to try and keep the forest persisting on the landscape. And in the meanwhile, I think people really need, especially young people, to start pressuring for a move to clean energy and give these forests the chance to persist in the future. Okay, so we can buy them some time while we start to get our act together to get to the real root of the problem and actually really deal with it. But there's a lot we can do.
Got a question in the chat. Are there opportunities for high school students in Montana to be involved in research?
I think so. We have two big universities here, and we also have some community colleges, and there are a lot of faculty that do research. There are people that are working at both universities on whitebark pine. I know that in Missoula, especially, there are science programs that pair researchers with high school students to do projects. I've worked with some. And so high school students should talk to their science teachers and see if there are programs in place. They can also contact faculty like myself or others that are working on whitebark pine if that's the thing they want to work on, and see if there are opportunities where they can volunteer, where they can do their own research projects. There are some forms and liability things you have to deal with, but there's a lot of opportunities for high school students to get involved in research or to go out on field trips. So I would encourage talking to science teachers and also contacting faculty at the universities to see if there are volunteer opportunities or internships, things like that. It's a nice way to learn if you like to do science too. It's like, you don't know until you try it. Some people, nah, that's not for me after a while, but I'll tell you, most people are like, this is pretty cool. So it gives you an opportunity to go in and actually do science. So I would encourage that.
And it looks like we had one other question about the film could inspire students to want to help. What can we do as teachers and students to help right now? Is there any habits or activities that students could do to help the cause?
I think, again, there are volunteer opportunities, but getting involved with organizations that are fighting climate change. You can write letters to legislators, things like that. There's lots of different things that can be done. And I'm glad this was brought up because I think it would be a really good thing to put together an action list, things that people can do. So you have a resource list and people can kind of look through it and see what might fit what they might like to do. That's nice. Maybe I'll start putting one of those together. So stay tuned. Please think in a month or so, bug me and maybe I'll have this together and I'll have people add their emails, people that want to be resources for students that are interested in getting involved. So that's a good point. Yeah.
We would happily add that to our educational resources and put it on our
Nice.
website with the film as well. I think that
I'll
would be
start putting that together.
yeah, great idea.
Good idea.
Well, Diana, we really appreciate your time today. And I think I really loved hearing your story and hearing about the film. And it was kind of a celebrity in our Zoom room here after doing the film and then getting to visit with you. So it was really wonderful. We're going to move on to sharing our educational resources. And Diana, you're more than welcome to stay with us and see what we have. But we also know you're very busy. And if you need to pop away, we completely understand. But thank you so much.
Well, thank you. It was super nice to be here. And I really would like people to encourage students to contact me and others that work on whitebark pine. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, if you are just joining us, I'm going to put a link in the chat box. This is our attendance form, and this is how we will be able to follow up with you after this to give you your OPI credits for attending today. And then at the very end of this training, we're going to give away a Google Home. So I noticed we have 9 responses on the form, and there are 17 of us here. So I think we could probably gather a little bit more information from people. And that is, we'll also share at the end some contact information for our team. I had the pleasure of getting to watch this film many, many times. And luckily it was such a great film because I was able to develop some of the resources that we can use as teachers to teach with the Ghost Forest, the film, with students. So I'm going to show you the resources that we have here at Montana PBS. And then I'm going to share it with Alana to share some of the Forest Service resources as well. And so my little showing demonstration begins with what I hope is just a blank Google screen. Is that what you see? Thumbs up. So if you've been with me before, and some of you have, you know about the free website we have for teachers, which is called pbslearningmedia.org. And so if you just go to your browser and you type in pbslearningmedia.org, it's going to bring you to this free content website for teachers. It's going to ask you if Montana PBS is your local station, and please say yes, and I'll tell you why in a little bit. This website is a repository of resources that come from PBS stations all over the country, and it's PBS content packaged for classrooms, which means it's videos, it's images, it's lesson plans. And a lot of local stations like ours take our films like Ghost Forest, and we edit the entire film into smaller clips to be used in the classroom, where we can align them to state and national standards. And then we can post to teaching materials, lesson plans, graphic organizers, and things like that to go with it. So we have a collection of resources that go along with Ghost Forest on this site, and I'm going to show you a couple of ways to find it. The first is very easy. From this page, if you just scroll down to about the bottom of the page, you'll see our award-winning series and collections, and Ghost Forest is this very first one. You can click on that and it'll take you to the collection. Or you can come here to our topic box and you can type Ghost Forests into the topic box, and it'll take you to the search results. And you'll see we have lots of search results. If you pick this one with the very big box, it'll take you to the collection. I'm also going to give you the direct link to this collection in the chat box so that you can go directly to that page from your browser. And what I did was we went through and we found about 9 clips from the film and edited them and chose a few activities to go with each one. We've also got the full film, which is, as Brianna said, about 26 minutes. You can watch the full film on our website, but that's a YouTube link. And if your school blocks YouTube, or if you have a hard time showing YouTube videos to your students, watching the full film here from PBS Learning Media, you'll see it's a little bit safer. We don't have some of the garbage that you see on YouTube. Each of these resources has, we attended grades 6 through 12. However, Deanna and I both feel like younger students can benefit quite a bit from this collection. Learning media doesn't like very large grade age ranges, so that's why it doesn't have K-12, because they keep giving me a ding on my content review reports when I do that. But please know that we think younger students can benefit from watching this film as well. And so you'll see each of these tabs is another video, or in this case, an image gallery. So we'll take a look at this one right here. These are beautiful images that Brianna took from the film that you could download and use in other applications. Or if you just click on the image, you can expand that and you could project that for students to do some observation of each of those images. Each image has a caption off to the side. You'll learn that blister rust is one of the reasons that we're losing the whitebark pine, and you'll learn about the whitebark pine best friend, the Clark's nutcracker, and the symbiotic relationship that the two have, as well as our attempts to grow the seedlings of the whitebark pine that are immune to some of these, the mountain pine beetle especially, as well as some these nice drone photos from overhead, the beautiful pictures from the film, and then these amazing scientists who get to climb trees and study the whitebark pine from the tops of treetops. So these are all here, and next to that we have a teacher's guide, as well as some discussion questions and a whole host of resources you can use with your students. The teacher's guide gives you a synopsis of the resource itself, some questions you might ask students, and it also gives you I'll just show you right here. This is a visual literacy lesson. So it shows you some questions you might ask students about these images and how they might talk about those images. I think it's fun to show these images before you might show the film and let them really talk and discuss what they see and what they're thinking about, access prior knowledge by showing these. And then you could go to clips from the film and talk about those topics. So that's our image gallery. This one is the film that you watched beforehand, and it's the almost 3-minute clip. If you click here on standards, if I sign in, it'll show me what are the Montana state standards that are aligned to this resource. If you sign up for a free account and you choose MontanaPBS as your station, that's how you'll get the Montana state standards that are aligned to each resource. And then you also have the national standards that go along with that. This resource has the teacher's guide, some discussion questions, and then a build a model activity. And then we also have these fact sheets that we got from the United States Forest Service, and Alana is going to talk a little bit more about that. A nice 1-pager about blister rust for this one. We also have a graphic organizer pack. And so if you wanted to have students do a KWL chart, Know, Wonder, Learn, or a Venn diagram comparing things from the film, either comparing the destruction of blister rust to the mountain pine beetle would be an example. You could also do the 3, the impact of the 3 mountain pine beetle, blister rust, and Clark's nutcracker on the whitebark pine. And then this is a cause and effect chart for showing the cause of one and how it affects the other. And these are all downloadable in PDFs that you could download and use with your students. We also have this, and this is a field guide. And I have to thank Laura on the call here for making this pretty. So it starts with some nice pictures from the film and a place where students might get to draw and write their observations as they're watching the film, or even if you were to take them out into the forest and do some observation there. Same with mountain pine beetle and the Clark's nutcracker and blister rust. So those are all some PDF printable activities, or you could put them, you'll notice in Learning Media does have a Google Classroom link. So all of these things can be shared via Google Classroom to do digitally. The exciting part about this collection is that Brianna made an introduction for us with Ilana Abramson from the Forest Service, and she shared with us this program, the Fireworks Educational Program. And thanks to their generosity, we have linked that curriculum to the Ghost Forest page so that you, and then Ilana helped us identify some of the fireworks lessons that they've created that go with whitebark pine, so that you might be able to use some of those with your classrooms as well. For instance, here, the mystery tree activity pops up, so you could show the video and then do the lesson, mystery tree lesson, that's on the fireworks website. So we're really excited that we were able to kind of blend both resources, because both of them have some amazing content for teachers to teach students about the whitebark pine. And so I'm going to stop sharing and send it over to Ilana so that she can talk about the fireworks curriculum more in detail and show you her resources.
Great, thank you. Thanks for the introduction, and I'm super excited to be involved with this, and I loved the film, so thanks for including me. So yes, I'm Ilana Abramson, and I work for the Forest Service at the Missoula Fire Sciences Lab, and one of the programs that I manage is fireworks. And that's what I'm going to talk to you a little bit about today if you're not familiar with it. So fireworks is an educational program that uses interactive hands-on activities to teach students about wildland fire science. So it's not specific to whitebark pine, it's broader, but I'll talk about how it pertains to whitebark pine. And it's designed for students in kindergarten through 12th grade. And the program consists of a curriculum of activities and trunks of materials that are associated with the activities. So I'm going to share my screen and show you our homepage and give you a little tour. So yeah, share my screen here. Let me know when you can see it. All right, awesome. So this is our fireworks homepage, and we actually offer, we look at this curriculum dropdown, we offer programs in many different regions throughout the country. And for us here in Montana, we would check out the Northern Rocky Mountains and Northern Cascades region. And for our region, we focus on 3 forest types: ponderosa pine, lodgepole pine, and whitebark pine. And the reason we do that is because we think it's super important for students to understand that fires have a diverse role in different ecosystems, and they affect ecosystems and organisms really differently. So moving over here to our Northern Rocky Mountains page, this is where you can find all of our activities. And you can see we offer activities at the elementary, the middle, and high school levels. And if you want our complete curriculum, you can select any of these bolded links here, and then you get the whole download PDF. Or you can go to any of these individual links for each individual lesson. And if I scroll down here, you'll see that we have about 20 lessons or more in each level. So there's a wealth of activities to choose from. So it can feel overwhelming at first, which is part of the reason we have workshops, which I'll talk about in a bit. Within each of these levels, we have 7 units. We start with an introduction. We have the physical science of wildland fire, the wildland fire environment. And together, these 2 units include activities that teach students how fires burn and how they burn in the wildlands. And many of these activities in these 2 units use fire. So it's really engaging for students, a lot of fun. Yeah, it's fun for me too. The next unit is fire effects on the environment. So these 3 units together mostly include lessons that aren't ecosystem specific. So that means they can be used anywhere where wildland fires burn. And we don't necessarily address whitebark pine specifically in most of these lessons, although there are extensions that do so. Moving down, we have fire's relationship with organisms and communities, and fire history and succession. And these two units are really where we start looking at ecosystem-specific activities that include whitebark pine ecosystems and whitebark pine species. And then finally, we have people and fire's homeland. So this is people's relationships with fire. So I thought we would take a quick look at one of these activities, and Nikki mentioned the mystery trees activity. So this is tree identification. And you'll notice that we actually have tree identifications at all 3 levels. And we think this is important because if students are going to understand how fires affect different species of trees, they should probably be able to identify those trees and know something about them. So we offer it at 3 levels, but we have a very different approach at each level. Looking at the elementary activity, which is the most straightforward, you can see that we have several links that you can download. We have a handout with an answer key. We have a photo packet with photos of all the species, but these are also in the trunks of materials. And then we have the lesson plan. And each of our lessons are, let me make this bigger, laid out the same way. And if you take a look at this box up here, you'll notice that we have a little picture of a box. And that's indicating that you'll actually need the fireworks trunks of materials to do this activity. Not all of the activities require the trunks, so that's why we have this here. And if it had a flame, it would mean that you're going to use fire in this activity. So we have the lesson overview, goals, and objectives. And I'm going to read you this overview because it's short. In this activity, students examine botanical specimens of tree species and learn to use a dichotomous key to identify them. So that's what they'll be doing. We have national educational standards, teacher background, the materials and preparation, procedure, and then assessment and evaluation. And in this specific lesson, because we want them to identify trees and learn how to use a key, that's what the assessment is. So out of their trunk, they would have all the specimens. I'll show these afterwards if we have time, but maybe you can see not so well, that they would have, if we were looking at whitebark pine, for example, they would have the cones, the bark, the leaves, and they would start answering some of these questions. Does it have needle-shaped leaves? Looking at their specimen, yes, it does. And they would work their way through the key and then correctly identify it as a whitebark pine. Flip over their sheet, read about whitebark pines to confirm that they've identified it correctly, and learn a little bit more about whitebark pines. So that's just a really quick tour of a lesson. I'm going to head back to the Northern Rockies page. I'll mention, so Nikki pointed out those fact sheets that she linked to from the Learning Media page, and those come from the Fireworks Encyclopedia. And this is a series of 30 to 40 two-page, well, we have 2 versions, but 2-page essays on 30 to 40 species in the Northern Rockies, and they're about the biology, ecology, and also their relationships to fire. So that's a really fun resource, and it's embedded in some of the lessons below. Nikki also, I think, mentioned the workshops, maybe not. So when we're not in a pandemic, we offer an annual workshop at the Missoula Fire Lab, which is a really fun place to come for a workshop. And these workshops are 2 days, and they're offered to any educator who's interested, and they cover all of the activities in our program. Teachers walk away feeling confident that they can use any of the lessons, use the trunks, And it's truly a lot of fun. I don't know when our next workshop will be, but this is where to find out, and you can check back with me as well. For Montana teachers, you can earn 16 OPI credits for participating in our workshop, or 1 continuing education credit from University of Montana. So lots of incentives there. We have a couple of videos. These are really short video clips, nothing like the caliber produced by Brianna, but they're just really short videos that can give you an idea what some of these lessons look like. And we hope to produce more when I can get back into the lab. And then I mentioned trunks of materials a few times. So the best way to get the trunks of material is by selecting this link right here. And it brings you to a list of where we have trunks scattered throughout the Northwest. And we have many in Montana. So if you're interested in borrowing a trunk, you don't have to take the workshop first. It certainly helps, but you don't need to. You can contact the person who hosts the trunk closest to you. If you have a hard time getting a trunk, you should contact me and we can help you out. Sometimes we'll ship things around. So that is all I wanted to show you on my screen. So I will stop sharing unless someone wants me to go back to something. And if you're interested, I can show you, maybe, it's hard with this thing, you know, so we have different specimens in our trunks. I don't know if you can see this. This is a little better. So the matchstick forest model is one of our most popular activities. Teachers, students can put wooden matches in these boards, and you can change the orientation to change the slopes. You can put more or less matches in here, and students observe, measure, analyze how fire behavior changes under different conditions. This is a really fun activity, and there's so much you can do with it. We have this, this is hard to share here. We have this chemical support stand that we can build trees. You can see a little of the tree. And students can light surface fires under the trees and see if they can prevent the surface fires from getting into the tops of the trees. We use these models for a lot of different activities, and these are included in the trunks as well. So anyway, the trunks are actually huge. They're like really quite big, but it's a great resource. And if anyone is interested in learning more about fireworks, I encourage you to contact me, and I'd be happy to add you to our contact list and go from there. That's it.
All right, thanks, Alana. You have some people in the chat box who have been sharing that they've used your resources or attended your workshops, and that's just great. It sounds like you've got some fans, and then you've got some people saying that they can't wait to use this stuff later. So this is contact information for our team, and I think Brianna, would you be able to connect people with Diana 6 if people wanted to follow up with her or have their students write to her? Do you think that would be?
Yes, absolutely.
That's kind of what I was thinking. All right, so that's our contact information for our team. And thanks to everybody for joining us this afternoon. We hope that you learned something. We hope that these resources will find their way into your classroom and in front of your students. And please reach out to us if we can help you with anything. We're just excited about this film, and we really appreciate your time and taking a look at it. So thanks so much.